Welcome to Crochet with Diane. If you've ever wanted to crochet one of these amazing super chunky blankets, then this is the video for you. I'm so pleased with how this has turned out. It looks beautiful on the bed or the sofa. In this video, I'll walk you through step by step how you can make your very own gorgeous super chunky blanket. There are plenty of top tips along the way so you can create a stunning piece of home decor that will have all your friends and family wanting one of their own. Don't forget to subscribe, like and share this video if you enjoy this or any of my crochet content. Hello everyone, my name's Diane. Welcome to my channel. I am really excited to bring this video to you today, showing you how I made this super bulky blanket with the super bulky yarn and the big crochet hook. If you're new to this channel and you haven't subscribed already, please do so. There's lots of crochet content for you. And onto the blanket. Now, working with the super bulky yarn and the big crochet hook is a lot different to working with your regular size yarn. So before you get stuck in, what I would recommend is watching the video through just once first, because as I've made the blanket and I was filming making the blanket, I came across things that would help to create that perfect finish, or as near to perfect as you can get. Little tips and tricks that I found helped me in making this blanket. So that's just a suggestion for you. Also, if you've got any questions whatsoever, please put them in the comment section below. I will address every question that is asked, and I'm always happy to help. Now, the measurements of the blanket is 35 by 55 inches, which is a sofa throw size, or for a child's bed, or just a snuggly blanket to wrap around you. Without further ado, let's get started. So to make this big chunky blanket, I've used a very big chunky yarn, and I got this one from Temu. It's an online store which is reasonably priced. I used 9 balls in total, and there is 250 grams in each ball. It doesn't tell you how many yards or meters are in each ball of wool, but I will put an alternative in the link in the description, which I believe would be the Bernat Blanket Big. Apparently that is very similar to this. So also I'm using a, see it there like that, 30mm crochet hook, and I chose the wooden one. I couldn't get the 30mm in any kind of plastic or metal type, but I got this from Amazon, and again I'll leave the link in the description below. So to get started, what we'll do is just quite simply, same as you would a normal wool, we'll make a slip knot and put in your hook, and we're ready to go. So we're going to start with a foundation chain of 28 and try to get your foundation chain stitches as even as possible. So yarn over and pull through, and what helps is if I push the stitch back onto the body of the hook, and it gives it a more uniform size. So, and again, and push it back onto the hook. With these wooden hooks, the groove for the hook is not very deep, so as you're bringing your wool through, just make sure you're hooking it into the groove of the hook, if you know what I mean. And each time slide it back on, and you get a more of a uniform stitch like this. So I'm doing it nice and slow, just to make sure I'm getting these stitches nice and even. Slide it back onto the hook each time. So continue like this, making 28 chains. And when you've got 28 chains, we're going to add 3 for the turning chain. So 1, 2 and 3. Okay, so for row 1 we're going to place a double crochet. In the UK that's a treble crochet into the 4th chain from the hook. So not this one. Count 1, 2, 3, 4. So this one here. So yarn over, 1, 2, 3, 4, and hook in, yarn over, and again I'm pushing the wool onto the body of the hook to keep the stitches nice and the same size. So put your hook in, pull up a loop. You got 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, and we're going to pull through 2 loops. And I find if I just grab hold of these with my whole hand, it pulls through quite nicely. And again, push it back onto the body of the hook. Yarn over again and pull through those last 2 loops. There we go, we've made our first double crochet stitch. We're going to make a double crochet stitch in each chain all the way along. So yarn over, find your next stitch. Just take your time, make sure you're not working into the one that you've just worked, but find your next one. So yarn over, hook in, yarn over, pull up a loop, and you've got 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, and pull through 2 loops each time, pushing the stitches back onto the body of the hook, then yarn over and pull through those last 2 loops, and the next one. As you see, each time I make a stitch, I'm pushing the remaining loops back onto the body of the hook, and it's creating quite an even stitch. So continue with your double crochet stitches into each chain along your foundation row. There we go. Keep going and I'll meet you at the end of this row. Just another tip for keeping your stitches nice and straight, because of the size of the wool, it twists quite easily, which with small wool you can get away with. Is while you're working along here, try not to twist your work. You know, when you're working with smaller wool, you can twist your work up like this, and you know it tends to stay fairly, you can't tell, but because of the size of the wool, you've got to keep everything nice and straight, because the definition really shows up. So another tip is, as you're working along, not only pushing your loops and stitches back onto the body of the hook, also keep this all nice and straight, so you're working from the top, not sort of bringing your work up like this so much, but keeping your work nice and flat. I found that to be quite helpful. So, you know, here we go, keeping it nice and upright and flat. I found it helpful in keeping those stitches nice and uniform and straight. Obviously, you know, practice a little bit. It doesn't hurt to just practice 1 or 2 rows until you get a feel of this big hook and the big yarn. See, I'm bringing it back up again so that it's sitting nice and flat. Pushing it back onto the hook, keeping it nice and flat, keeping everything in this direction. I hope you know what I mean, but you know, practice a little bit. It took me a few goes to get these stitches nice and straight. So I'm working, instead of bringing it up here like this, I'm going to work with it nice and flat. And each time pushing those stitches back onto the body of the hook, bringing it through and keeping this nice and flat. And then like that, and you can see it's really helping to keep these stitches nice in their definition. So as you work, carry on along your foundation row, and I'll meet you at the end of this row. So here we are at the end of the row, and as you know, when you're crocheting with a regular size wool, you wouldn't work into your slip knot, but because of the size of this wool, all that's going to do is leave a gap. So we're actually going to work our last stitch right into that very last one, which is in fact the slip knot. Trying not to twist your tail end into the stitch. There we go. So as you can see, it's pulled your tail end up slightly, and we wouldn't normally do this with regular wool, but we don't really want that big gap. So we're on to row 2. So we're going to chain 2. Turn your work. Now for the pattern is we're going to alternate between a row of double crochet stitches and then a row of half double crochet stitches. In the UK, that would be a row of treble crochet stitches alternated with a row of half treble crochet stitches. So we've chained 2, and we're going to also be working into the back loop only to give it some texture. So yarn over, and we're going to work into the very first stitch. Again, because of the size of the wool, it would leave too much of a gap to skip onto the second stitch. So yarn over, hook, let's move that out of the way. Right, yarn over, hook into that back loop, the back loop of your very first stitch there, pull up a loop. You've got 3 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. Again, taking your time to keep it nice and straight. Now put it in a half double crochet in every stitch along the row. So yarn over, hook in to your next stitch, pull up a loop, 3 loops on your hook, again keeping it nice and straight, flat to the table, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops, and then push your stick back onto the stitch back onto the body of the hook. And this row, row 2, is a half double crochet stitch into each and every stitch into the back loop only. One thing I find with this chunky yarn is it's really worth taking your time and just flattening out every stitch every time. It's going to work up quick enough, so it really is worth just taking your time to get these stitches nice and even and nice and straight. So there we go, putting it back straight flat to the table, yarn over and pull through all three loops there. So keep going with your half double crochets in every stitch along this row. And again, I'll meet you at the end of this row and we'll move on to row 3. So here we are at the end of row 2. I've just placed my last stitch at the top of this double crochet stitch here, and the last stitch we're going to place into the top of that chain 3 turning chain that we did on the foundation row. So yarn over into the back loop only, and make your last stitch into the top of that chain, turning chain. So for row 3 we're back on to doing the double crochet stitch. So first of all we're going to chain 2, 1 and 2, and turn your work. I see it's already starting to get nice and big. Okay, so we're back onto the double crochet stitch, or treble crochet if you're working in UK terms. And again, we will be working straight into the very first stitch, not the second. So there's no big gaps. So yarn over and again into the back loop only. Make your double crochet. And then in each and every stitch all the way along in the back loop only, make a double crochet stitch. And again, taking your time, make sure you're not putting it into the one you've just worked. Find your next stitch, hook in, pull up a loop, 3 loops on your hook. Again, keeping the whole thing nice and flat to the table. Yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over and pull through 2. Keep going along this row, double crochet in the back loop only in each and every stitch. So we're at the end of row 3 and I've just put my last double crochet stitch into the top of the last half double crochet stitch from the row below, and we'll place our last stitch into the turning chain into the, we've got a turning chain of 2 here. If you just turn your work slightly, we're going to place it into the back loop of this turning chain here. Make your last double crochet stitch. There we go. And that makes the edges nice and straight. So there is row 3. So your row repeat rows 2 and 3. So you're alternating your half double crochet stitch for a row and then a row of double crochet stitch. So the next row you would start by chaining 2, and turn your work. It's now getting very big and bulky. It's going to be gorgeous when it's finished. And the next row will be your half double crochet or half treble in the UK terms. So we would, you can rewind this video. All we're doing now is repeating rows 2 and 3 over and over again until your blanket is the size you want it to be. So into this very first stitch, the back loop only, yarn over and make your half double crochet, which is yarn over and pull through all 3 loops, and then in each and every stitch all the way along the row. And then your next row would be your row of double crochet stitches. So you're alternating between the 2. There we go. And there we go. It is starting to take on some shape. I'm going to carry on now and do a few more rows. You keep going, repeating rows 2 and 3 over and over again until your blanket is the size you want it to be. When it comes to joining a new ball of wool, there are a couple of ways you can do this. You can tie a knot, leaving nice long ends for you to sort of push, sew in through with your fingers. So, you would just do a little overhand knot like so, and leaving your ends to sew in as normal. The way I've been doing this is so as to not to use up too much wool, because as you know, there's not too many meters on a ball of wool, this chunky wool, is I've got 2 very short ends here, and I'm going just to make a overhand knot. You can see this, but I'm going around once and then round again. So it's called a surgeon's knot. so that when you pull it tight, it really shouldn't come undone. And pull it tight this way. Nice and tight. And then I'm going to grab my scissors, making sure you're nice and happy that that knot, pull it both ways, is nice and tight. Just snip those off as close to the knot as you can. Not ridiculously close, but close enough that when you're crocheting your stitches in, that they don't stick out. And because of the size of the wool, oh, these aren't the sharpest scissors. There we go. So should just blend in with the stitches because the stitches being so big. Again, it's entirely up to you. If you feel you want to have the ends long enough for you to weave in, then you can do that as well. But that's the method I've been using. Okay, so I've come across another little thing that I have found is happening. I don't know if it's because of the size of the wool, I'm sure it must be, is these edges were starting to go slightly wonky. So I look back at the work, and a top tip that I have for you is count your stitches at the end of every row you've crocheted. I know it sounds a little time consuming, but this row was going in and out, and it somehow I was adding in stitches. Now whether that's because we're putting in a stitch into this very first crochet stitch, which with a normal double crochet you wouldn't, you'd skip to the second. But that was one thing I've learned is I then unraveled, luckily I hadn't done too many rows, unraveled a couple of rows and made sure that I counted along every row once I'd crocheted a row to make sure I got exactly the same amount of stitches. So I hope that helps you when you're creating your big chunky blanket. Okay, so here I am at the end of the last row, and I'm just going to put in my last stitch. And I do have a little bit of wool left, but it won't be enough for another row. So to finish off, as you would with any yarn, we yarn over and pull through. And I'm going to pull through enough so I can weave in the ends, grab my scissors, got a bit more sharper scissors this time, pull that through and snug that down nice and tight. Okay. As you can see, I'm working with the bottom end folded upwards so it will fit on the table. You may have moved to the carpet by now. Right, so to sew in the ends, I'm going to just use my fingers and pull the camera in. Going to weave with my fingers. Obviously, I don't think there's a darning needle big enough. If there is, guys, let me know. And I'm just going to feel my way through a few stitches. So it looks nice and tidy, not too tight, keeping the tension as similar to the stitches as possible. And then I'm going to go through that end one. Do this, you know, keep looking at your work and do this how you feel it looks like it's weaving in, looking like part of the stitch. And I'm going to come back out this side. And then I'm going to go back up the other way. And each time just sort of look at your stitch, and if you feel that it doesn't match, which, see, I'm feeling that one is sticking out a little bit too much. So take your time again with this part to weave in your ends so it looks like it matches your stitches. So I'm going to go up through there. There we go, that's a bit better. Now I'm going to double back around that one twice. Just to give it a little bit of security so it doesn't come undone, and then back through. Couple of stitches here. And I'm going to move down here. There. I think that's not too bad. And I'm going to snip off the end of that wool. And that has sewn in quite well. I'm going to move all this, put the blanket flat on the table so that you can see the blanket. So here is the finished blanket. I'm having to hold the camera in my hand at the moment because I can't get it all in shot with it on the stand, but I'm trying to give you an idea. From this view you can really see the texture using the double crochet with the half double crochet in between. Really gives it a beautiful texture. So I've really Really enjoyed making this blanket, and I would love to hear from you if you've decided to give it a try. I would certainly encourage you to do so. It has turned out absolutely beautiful and I can't wait to get it on my sofa. Let me know how it goes and if indeed any of my top tips helped you at all. So happy crocheting, and I'll see you next time.